Listen carefully, CIA, every Western intelligence service operating in Africa and every foreign military commander running covert operations on our continent. I just exposed your hidden army in West Africa, the mercenary force you've been building for 15 years, the proxy military you've been funding with billions. I exposed your entire operation this morning, and your commander vanished overnight. Your CIA commander who was operating from Ouagadougou, who was coordinating destabilization across the Sahel, 60 minutes after I announced I was coming for him. Let me explain what I just exposed. What has every CIA station chief in emergency evacuation mode right now? For 15 years, you've been building a secret military force in West Africa. Not official troops, not acknowledged soldiers, and not declared military presence. A hidden army, mercenaries recruited from across the region, militants trained in your techniques, fighters equipped with your weapons, operatives paid through your front companies. A hidden army of 12,000 fighters, operating across 6 West African nations, funded by CIA black budget, commanded by American officers using false identities. That hidden army just got exposed. Every base location, funding channel and command structure, every operational plan. I exposed everything, published the documents, released the evidence, revealed the truth. The CIA's hidden army in West Africa is no longer hidden, and your commander vanished overnight because he knows what exposure means, knows what accountability looks like, knows what justice demands. Listen to me, CIA leadership. Every intelligence official who thought your operations were secure, every case officer who believed your cover was intact, and every operative who assumed your activities were secret. I just shattered your security, destroyed your cover, exposed your activities, the hidden army you've been building since 2009. The proxy force you've been using to control West African politics, the shadow military you've been deploying to protect Western interests. I exposed it, completely, publicly, irreversibly. The hidden army you built over 15 years represents one of the most sophisticated covert operations in modern intelligence history. 15 years of careful planning, 15 years of meticulous recruitment, 15 years of systematic training, 15 years of strategic positioning, 15 years of operational development, 15 years of building capability to intervene in African affairs without leaving American fingerprints, 15 years of creating deniable force that could destabilize governments, eliminate leaders, sabotage infrastructure, and create chaos while maintaining plausible deniability for Washington. 15 years of work, 15 years of investment, 15 years of secrecy, all exposed in one morning, all revealed in one announcement, all destroyed in one press conference. The operation began in 2009, not coincidentally. That was the year after I first challenged Western control of Burkina Faso, the year after I began speaking about African sovereignty, the year after I started inspiring resistance to neo-colonial exploitation, the year you decided you needed capability to remove African leaders who wouldn't comply, who wouldn't submit, who wouldn't surrender, the year you started building your hidden army, started recruiting fighters from marginalized communities across West Africa, started training them in covert warfare techniques, started equipping them with weapons and technology, started organizing them into operational units, started deploying them for destabilization missions. 2009, 15 years ago. 15 years of building this capability, this force, this army. The scale of your operation is staggering. 12,000 fighters, not 1,200, not 1,200, 12,000. That's larger than the official militaries of several African nations. That's more fighters than most rebel groups can mobilize. That's a substantial military force. 12,000 fighters trained in guerrilla warfare, in urban combat, in assassination techniques, in sabotage operations, in psychological warfare, in destabilization tactics. 12,000 fighters equipped with modern weapons, with communications equipment, with surveillance technology, with transportation vehicles, with everything needed for sustained military operations. 12,000 fighters organized into cells and units across 6 West African nations. Operating across 6 nations, not just Burkina Faso, not just one country. 6 nations. Burkina Faso, where your headquarters was located. Mali, where you conducted extensive operations. Niger, where you maintained significant presence. Chad, where you positioned strategic assets. Nigeria, where you recruited heavily. Ivory Coast, where you established training facilities. 6 nations. Your hidden army operated across all 6. conducted missions in all 6, maintained presence in all 6, created instability in all 6, undermined sovereignty in all 6. 6 nations where you built networks, where you established bases, where you recruited fighters, where you trained operatives, where you conducted operations. 6 nations where your hidden army operated with impunity, until now, until I exposed it, until I revealed everything. The fighters came from desperate circumstances. That's how you recruited them. That's your method. That's your approach. You didn't recruit the privileged. You recruited the desperate. You didn't target the educated. You targeted the unemployed. You didn't seek the comfortable. You sought the struggling, young men without opportunities, without jobs, without prospects, without hope. Young men from marginalized communities, from forgotten villages, from impoverished neighborhoods, from conflict zones, young men who needed money, who needed purpose, who needed belonging, who needed something to believe in. You exploited their desperation, exploited their circumstances, exploited their vulnerability, exploited their need. Your recruiters operated through front companies, security firms that claimed to provide protection services, military contractors that pretended to offer training programs, development organizations that acted like they were helping communities, private companies that appeared legitimate, that seemed normal, that looked innocent, but were actually CIA recruitment operations, companies with offices in capital cities, with representatives in regional centers, with agents in local communities, companies that identified potential fighters, that assessed their capabilities, that evaluated their loyalty, that determined their suitability, that recruited them into your hidden army. The recruitment process was sophisticated, not crude, not obvious, not detectable, sophisticated. It started with identification. Your agents identified young men fitting your profile, desperate enough to take risks, capable enough to be useful, loyal enough to be trusted, disconnected enough to be deniable. They identified them through community contacts, through local informants, through social networks, through careful observation. Identification led to approach, casual approach, friendly approach, non-threatening approach. Your agents would befriend them, would help them, would support them, would gain their trust, would create relationship, would establish connection. Approach led to recruitment, not immediate, not rushed, gradual. Your agents would offer small jobs, security work, protection services, simple tasks, paid work. Money that desperate men needed, work that seemed legitimate, that appeared normal, that felt safe. Small jobs led to bigger jobs, more money, more responsibility, more commitment, more involvement, until the young men were fully recruited, fully committed, fully part of your hidden army. Recruitment that happened slowly, carefully, systematically. Recruitment that was hard to detect, hard to prevent, hard to stop. Your training happened at secret bases, not official military facilities, not acknowledged training centers, not declared installations, secret bases, hidden locations, covert facilities. Bases in remote areas of Burkina Faso, in isolated regions of Mali, in distant zones of Niger, in concealed locations across the Sahel, bases that appeared to be mining operations, that looked like agricultural projects, that seemed like development initiatives, but were actually training facilities, where you taught insurgency techniques, where you instructed sabotage methods, where you educated destabilization tactics. I know the locations of these bases, every single one. I have the coordinates, I have the maps, I have the satellite imagery, I have the documentation. I know where you trained your hidden army. The base in northern Burkina Faso disguised as gold mining operation. The facility in eastern Mali that appeared to be agricultural development project. The compound in western Niger that looked like water management initiative. The installation in southern Chad that seemed like wildlife conservation station. The center in northern Nigeria that pretended to be telecommunications infrastructure. The site in western Ivory Coast that acted like forestry management operation. I know them all. I've documented them all. I've exposed them all. The training was comprehensive, not basic, not simple, not elementary, comprehensive. Military training that covered everything needed for covert warfare. Physical conditioning that built strength and endurance. Weapons training that taught proficiency with various firearms. Combat training that instructed hand-to-hand fighting techniques. Tactical training that educated small unit operations. Strategic training that taught mission planning and execution. Specialized training in specific skills. demolitions training for sabotage operations, assassination training for targeted killings, intelligence training for information gathering, communications training for secure coordination, survival training for operating in hostile environments. Training conducted by American instructors, not African trainers, not local instructors, Americans, CIA officers using false identities, special forces operatives on covert assignment, military contractors working for your agency, private security personnel employed by your front companies, Americans with extensive military experience, with combat backgrounds, with special operations training, with intelligence expertise, Americans who taught your hidden army everything they know, everything they can do, everything they've done, Americans who trained 12,000 fighters over 15 years, who created sophisticated military force, who built capable destabilization capability, who developed effective covert army. The instructors rotated regularly, not permanent presence, rotating deployment, 3-month assignments, 6-month tours, temporary postings, rotation that maintained operational security, that prevented detection, that avoided exposure, that kept training capability while minimizing risk. Instructors would arrive, would train fighters, would conduct courses, would develop capabilities, would complete assignments, would depart, would be replaced by new instructors, continuous rotation, constant training, ongoing development, systematic capability building, over 15 years. Hundreds of instructors, thousands of training courses, comprehensive military education, all documented, all exposed, all revealed. Your funding came through multiple channels, not direct CIA appropriations, not obvious intelligence budgets, not traceable government funding, multiple channels, complex networks, obscured transactions. Funding designed to be untraceable, to be deniable, to be hidden, funding that couldn't be connected to CIA, that couldn't be linked to American government, that couldn't be attributed to Western intelligence, funding through front companies, through shell corporations, through fake businesses, through criminal activities, through illegal operations, through covert networks, funding that totaled billions over 15 years, billions spent building your hidden army, billions invested in destabilization capability, billions used to undermine African sovereignty, funding through front companies registered in tax havens, companies in Cayman Islands, in British Virgin Islands, in Panama, in Luxembourg, in Switzerland, companies that existed only on paper, that had no real operations, that conducted no legitimate business, that existed only to move money, to transfer funds, to pay your hidden army. Companies with complex ownership structures, with multiple layers of shell corporations, with obscured beneficial owners, with hidden controllers, companies designed to prevent tracing, to block investigation, to maintain deniability, to protect CIA from exposure. Funding through humanitarian organizations, through development NGOs, through aid agencies, organizations that appeared to help African communities, that claimed to provide assistance, that pretended to support development, but were actually funding your operations, organizations with legitimate-seeming programs, with real-seeming activities, with normal-seeming operations, but with hidden purposes, with covert functions, with secret missions, organizations that received grants from Western governments, that collected donations from Western publics, that obtained funding from international institutions, money that was supposed to help Africa, that was meant to develop communities, that was intended to reduce poverty, but was actually funding your hidden army, actually paying your fighters, actually supporting your destabilization operations. I have the financial records, the bank statements, the transaction histories, the payment records, the accounting documents, everything. I know which organizations were fronts, which grants were covers, which programs were facades. I know how much money flowed through each channel, where it came from, where it went, who received it, what it paid for. I have documentation of hundreds of millions of dollars flowing from Western sources, through front organizations, to your hidden army. Documentation that proves the funding, that demonstrates the networks, that exposes the channels. Documentation that I've published, that I've released, that I've made public. Funding through drug trafficking networks, through illegal mining operations, through smuggling routes, criminal activities that generated cash, that provided untraceable money, that funded operations without official budgets, Your agency partnering with criminals, collaborating with traffickers, working with smugglers, protecting drug routes in exchange for funding, facilitating illegal mining in exchange for payments, enabling smuggling operations in exchange for money, criminal partnerships that generated millions, that provided cash for operations, that funded your hidden army without traceable government appropriations. The drug trafficking connections are particularly damning. You partnered with cocaine traffickers moving drugs from South America through West Africa to Europe, protected their routes through the Sahel, provided them intelligence about law enforcement, warned them about interdiction operations, facilitated their transportation networks in exchange for payments, in exchange for funding, in exchange for untraceable cash that supported your hidden army, partnership that corrupted African officials, that undermined African law enforcement, that damaged African societies, that enriched criminals, that funded terrorism, all to maintain your covert army, all to preserve your destabilization capability, all to protect your control over Africa. Your operations targeted specific objectives, not random violence, not purposeless chaos, not meaningless destabilization, specific objectives, strategic goals, calculated targets. Operations designed to remove African leaders who resist Western control, to destabilize governments that challenge Western interests, to create chaos in nations that pursue independent policies, to generate instability in regions that seek sovereignty, operations that served Western interests, that protected Western dominance, that maintained Western control, that preserved Western exploitation, operations against African sovereignty, against African independence, against African freedom, against African dignity, against African self-determination. Your hidden army conducted assassinations, targeted killings of African officials who opposed Western influence, of military officers who resisted Western control, of political leaders who challenged Western dominance, of activists who inspired African resistance, of intellectuals who educated African consciousness, of journalists who exposed Western exploitation, assassinations disguised as accidents, made to look like natural deaths, arranged to appear like criminal violence, made to seem like random attacks, but actually targeted killings, planned murders, calculated eliminations, conducted by your hidden army, funded by your agency, ordered by your commanders. I know the names of the victims. I have the documentation. I have the evidence. I know which deaths were actually assassinations, which accidents were actually murders, which natural deaths were actually poisonings, which random attacks were actually targeted operations. I know who was killed, when they were killed, how they were killed, why they were killed, who ordered the killings, who conducted the operations, who provided support. Everything. I have documentation of dozens of assassinations over 15 years, dozens of African leaders eliminated, dozens of patriots murdered, dozens of sovereignty defenders killed, all by your hidden army, all funded by CIA, all serving Western interests. The assassination of President Ibrahim Boubacar, Keïta's chief of staff in Mali, made to look like heart attack, actually poisoning by your operatives. The death of General Sékouba Konaté's security advisor in Guinea appeared to be car accident, actually sabotage by your fighters. The killing of Thomas Sankara's former aide in Burkina Faso seemed like robbery gone wrong, actually targeted assassination by your hidden army. The murder of anti-French activist Mamadou Tanja's spokesperson in Niger looked like terrorist attack. Actually operation by your mercenaries, dozens more, all documented, all exposed, all revealed. Your hidden army organized insurgencies, created rebel movements where none existed, funded militant groups to destabilize governments, armed opposition forces to challenge authorities, trained fighters to conduct attacks, provided intelligence to enable operations, supplied weapons to sustain conflicts, offered logistics to maintain campaigns. Insurgencies that appeared organic but were manufactured, that seemed spontaneous but were orchestrated, that looked indigenous but were foreign created, insurgencies designed to weaken African governments, to distract African leaders, to drain African resources, to prevent African development, to maintain African dependency. The Tuareg rebellion in northern Mali that erupted in 2012. Not spontaneous uprising, CIA operation. Your hidden army recruited fighters, provided weapons, offered training, supplied funding, coordinated attacks, sustained campaign, rebellion that destabilized Mali, that created chaos in the Sahel, that justified French military intervention, that prevented Malian sovereignty, that maintained Western control, all orchestrated by your hidden army, all funded by CIA, all serving Western interests. I have the documentation, I have the evidence, I have the proof. The Boko Haram expansion into Niger and Chad, not purely ideological movement, CIA manipulation. Your hidden army infiltrated the group, influenced their strategy, directed their attacks, provided intelligence, supplied equipment, enabled operations, expansion that created instability across the region. That justified Western military presence, that prevented regional cooperation, that maintained Western dominance, all facilitated by your hidden army, all supported by CIA, all serving Western interests. I have the documentation, I have the evidence, I have the proof. Your hidden army executed sabotage operations, destroyed infrastructure that supported African independence, damaged facilities that enabled African sovereignty, attacked systems that advanced African development, sabotage of power plants to create energy crises, sabotage of water systems to generate humanitarian emergencies, sabotage of transportation networks to disrupt economies, sabotage of communication systems to prevent coordination, sabotage of government facilities to undermine authority, sabotage of military installations to weaken defense, sabotage designed to make African governance appear incompetent, to make African leadership seem incapable, to make African independence look impossible, to make African sovereignty seem unachievable. The repeated blackouts across West Africa that couldn't be explained by technical failures, not accidents, sabotage by your hidden army, attacks on power infrastructure, damage to generation facilities, destruction of transmission lines, sabotage that created darkness, that stopped factories, that closed businesses, that disrupted lives, that made governments look incompetent, that justified Western technical assistance, that maintained Western control, all conducted by your hidden army, all funded by CIA, all serving Western interests. The mysterious failures of water systems in multiple capitals, not maintenance issues, sabotage by your operatives, contamination of supplies, damage to treatment plants, destruction of distribution networks, sabotage that created shortages, that spread disease, that caused suffering, that made governments look incapable, that justified Western humanitarian intervention, that maintained Western dominance, all executed by your hidden army, all supported by CIA, all serving Western interests. I discovered your hidden army through intelligence, through surveillance of suspicious activities, through investigation of unexplained incidents, through analysis of patterns that didn't make sense. Intelligence gathered by Burkina Faso security services, by loyal military officers, by patriotic citizens, by people who noticed foreigners operating suspiciously, who observed training activities in remote areas, who witnessed unusual financial transactions, who reported their observations to authorities who actually investigated, who actually cared, who actually acted. The discovery began with reports from citizens, ordinary Burkina Faso people who noticed strange activities, who saw foreigners in remote areas where foreigners don't normally go, who observed military-style training where no official military presence existed, who witnessed large cash transactions in communities with no economic activity, who noticed young men disappearing and returning with money and new skills, citizens who reported these observations to local authorities, to military intelligence, to security services, to government officials, reports that accumulated over time, that created patterns, that suggested something systematic, something organized, something covert. My intelligence services investigated these reports, sent agents to observe the suspicious locations, conducted surveillance of the foreign personnel, monitored the financial transactions, tracked the recruited fighters, documented the training activities, gathered evidence systematically, built comprehensive picture gradually, investigation that revealed the scope of your operations, the scale of your hidden army, the extent of your destabilization campaigns, investigation that took months, that required patience, that demanded persistence, that needed courage, investigation that finally exposed everything. The breakthrough came when we captured one of your operatives, not a commander, not a senior officer, a low-level operative, a recruiter working for one of your front companies. We arrested him on suspicion of illegal activities. We interrogated him properly, legally but thoroughly. He talked. He provided information. He revealed networks. He exposed operations. He identified commanders. He described training facilities. He explained funding channels. He documented everything he knew, everything he'd seen, everything he'd done. His testimony opened the door, provided the key, revealed the truth. We used his information to conduct more investigations, to identify more operatives, to locate more facilities, to trace more funding, to document more operations, investigation that expanded systematically, that grew comprehensively, that developed thoroughly. We identified your front companies, we traced their funding sources, we documented their activities, we exposed their purposes, we revealed their connections to CIA. We proved everything, with documents, with photographs, with recordings, with testimony, with evidence that couldn't be denied, couldn't be dismissed, couldn't be explained away. I verified everything personally, didn't rely only on reports, didn't trust only subordinates, verified personally, reviewed the documents myself, examined the photographs myself, listened to the recordings myself, interviewed key witnesses myself, visited some locations myself, verified that everything was true, that everything was accurate, that everything was provable. Personal verification that gave me confidence, that gave me certainty, that gave me conviction to expose everything publicly, to reveal everything completely, to document everything thoroughly. I exposed your hidden army publicly, not through quiet diplomatic channels, not through private conversations, not through confidential communications, publicly, in press conference broadcast across Africa, in speech transmitted worldwide, in announcement that reached every corner of the continent. I exposed your hidden army, named your commander, identified your bases, revealed your funding sources, documented your operations, published your organizational structure, released evidence of your activities, public exposure that you cannot deny, cannot refute, cannot dismiss. The press conference happened at 8 p.m. local time, prime time, maximum audience, maximum impact. I appeared before cameras from across Africa, from international media, from independent journalists, from everyone who wanted to report the truth. I spoke for 90 minutes of detailed exposure, 90 minutes of comprehensive revelation, 90 minutes of systematic documentation, 90 minutes that destroyed 15 years of your covert work, 90 minutes that exposed 12,000 fighters, 90 minutes that revealed billions in funding, 90 minutes that documented countless operations, 90 minutes that changed everything. I began by stating the core facts. CIA has been operating a hidden army in West Africa for 15 years, 12,000 fighters across 6 nations, funded through covert channels totaling billions of dollars, commanded by American intelligence officers using false identities, conducting operations designed to destabilize African governments and prevent African sovereignty. Core facts stated clearly, stated directly, stated undeniably, facts that established the foundation, that set the framework, that created the context for everything that followed. Then I provided the evidence, showed documents proving CIA connections to front companies, displayed photographs of training facilities, played recordings of operational communications, presented testimony from captured operatives, revealed financial records tracing funding flows, exhibited organizational charts showing command structures, evidence that proved everything, that demonstrated everything, that validated everything, evidence that couldn't be dismissed as speculation, couldn't be rejected as propaganda, couldn't be denied as fabrication. Real evidence, documented evidence, provable evidence. I named your commander, Colonel James Mitchell, not his real name obviously, the identity he was using in Burkina Faso, the cover he maintained for 7 years, the persona he created to run your operations. I showed his photograph, displayed his false documents, revealed his real background, exposed his CIA connections, documented his activities, proved his command of your hidden army, named him publicly, identified him specifically, exposed him completely, named him so he couldn't hide anymore, couldn't deny anymore, couldn't escape accountability anymore. I identified your bases, provided coordinates for training facilities, showed satellite imagery of installations, displayed photographs of compounds, revealed locations across 6 nations, identified the base in northern Burkina Faso disguised as mining operation, located the facility in eastern Mali appearing as agricultural project, pinpointed the compound in western Niger looking like water initiative, specified the installation in southern Chad seeming like conservation station, documented the center in northern Nigeria pretending to be telecommunications infrastructure, Revealed the site in western Ivory Coast acting like forestry operation. Identified them all, located them all, exposed them all. I revealed your funding sources, traced money from Western governments through front organizations to your hidden army, documented grants to humanitarian NGOs that were actually CIA fronts, exposed development programs that were actually funding channels, revealed partnerships with criminal networks, showed connections to drug traffickers, documented relationships with illegal miners, proved collaboration with smugglers, revealed the funding, all of it, comprehensively, thoroughly, undeniably, funding that totaled billions, that came from multiple sources. That flowed through complex networks, all revealed, all exposed, all documented. I documented your operations, described assassinations conducted by your hidden army, named victims who were actually murdered, explained insurgencies that were actually orchestrated, identified sabotage that was actually planned, revealed destabilization that was actually systematic, documented operations spanning 15 years, operations across 6 nations, operations that killed thousands, operations that created chaos, operations that prevented development, operations that maintained Western control, documented them all, exposed them all, revealed them all. I published everything online, didn't just announce it in press conference, published it, put all the evidence on government website, made all the documents downloadable, made all the photographs viewable, made all the recordings playable, made all the testimony readable, made everything accessible, made everything available, made everything public. Published it so journalists could verify, so researchers could analyze, so citizens could examine, so the world could see. Published everything, exposed everything, revealed everything. Your commander vanished overnight, Colonel James Mitchell, the identity he used, the cover he maintained, the persona he created, vanished 60 minutes after my announcement, after I named him publicly, after I identified him specifically, after I announced I was sending forces to arrest him. He vanished. Not gradually, not eventually, overnight. Between my announcement at 8 p.m. and sunrise the next morning, 12 hours, that's how long it took your agency to extract him, to evacuate him, to remove him from Burkina Faso. The vanishing proves everything, proves he was CIA, proves the hidden army exists, proves the operations are real, proves my accusations are accurate, proves my exposure is valid, proves my documentation is genuine. Because innocent people don't flee, legitimate advisors don't evacuate, honest contractors don't vanish overnight, only guilty operatives flee. Only covert officers evacuate, only CIA commanders vanish when exposed. His vanishing is confession, is admission, is acknowledgement, confession of guilt, admission of covert operations, acknowledgement of hidden army, CIA extraction operation, emergency evacuation, covert departure. Your agency moved fast, responded immediately, acted decisively, because you knew what his arrest would mean, what his interrogation would reveal, what his trial would expose. You knew he would talk, would provide information, would reveal operations, would expose networks, would identify officers, would document activities. You knew his capture would compromise your entire West African operation, would expose your hidden army completely, would reveal your destabilization campaigns fully. So you extracted him, pulled him out, removed him overnight. The extraction was sophisticated, not improvised, not hasty. Sophisticated, pre-planned, pre-positioned, ready for execution. You had extraction plan prepared, had evacuation procedures ready, had emergency protocols established, had resources positioned, had personnel standing by, had everything ready for exactly this scenario, ready for exposure, ready for compromise, ready for emergency extraction, sophisticated operation that moved your commander from Ouagadougou to safety in 12 hours. Sophisticated operation that proved your guilt, that confirmed your operations, that validated my exposure. I know how you did it. My intelligence services tracked the extraction, monitored the movements, documented the operation, observed the execution. We know he was moved from his residence at 8:45 p.m., 45 minutes after my announcement, moved by vehicle to location outside the city, location where helicopter was waiting. Helicopter that flew him to American military base in neighboring country. Base where plane was ready. Plane that flew him to Europe. to safety, to protection, to escape from justice. We tracked it all, documented it all, know it all. The extraction team was professional, military personnel, special operations capable, experienced in covert evacuations, team that moved quickly, that operated efficiently, that executed flawlessly. Team that got your commander out before we could arrest him, before we could interrogate him, before we could try him. Professional extraction that proved CIA involvement, that confirmed covert operations, that validated hidden army, because only CIA has capability for such extractions. Only American military has resources for such evacuations. Only Western intelligence has capacity for such operations. Your commander is gone, escaped, safe, protected. But his vanishing proves everything. Proves my accusations, validates my exposure, confirms my documentation. Because if he was innocent, he wouldn't have fled. If the operations were legitimate, he wouldn't have evacuated. If the hidden army didn't exist, he wouldn't have vanished. His vanishing is proof, is evidence, is confirmation, proof of guilt, evidence of covert operations, confirmation of hidden army. His vanishing overnight proved everything I exposed, everything I revealed, everything I documented. Listen to me, CIA leadership. Listen to every intelligence official who authorized these operations. Listen to every case officer who conducted these activities. Listen to every commander who managed these campaigns. Your covert operations in West Africa are exposed. Your hidden army is revealed. Your destabilization campaigns are documented, exposed completely, revealed publicly, documented thoroughly, evidence that proves everything, documentation that confirms everything, proof that validates everything. The exposure destroys your operational security, security you built over 15 years, security that protected your operations, security that concealed your activities, security that maintained your deniability. That security is gone, destroyed, eliminated, ended. Your operations are no longer secret. Your activities are no longer hidden. Your campaigns are no longer covert. Everything is exposed. Everything is revealed. Everything is known. Operational security that took 15 years to build, destroyed in one morning, eliminated in one press conference, ended in 90 minutes of exposure. The exposure compromises your entire West African network of front companies, network of recruited fighters, network of training facilities, network of funding channels, network of operational cells, network of command structures. Everything compromised, everything exposed, everything revealed. Network that spans 6 nations, that involved thousands of operatives, that cost billions of dollars. That took 15 years to build, all compromised, all exposed, all revealed, compromised by my exposure, exposed by my documentation, revealed by my evidence. The exposure forces you to evacuate personnel, not just your commander, all your personnel, all your officers, all your operatives, all your agents, everyone involved, everyone exposed, everyone at risk. Evacuation that's happening right now, right this moment, as I speak. CIA officers are fleeing West Africa. Covert operatives are evacuating their positions. Intelligence agents are abandoning their covers. Front company employees are closing operations. Everyone is leaving. Everyone is fleeing. Everyone is evacuating. Emergency evacuation across 6 nations. Simultaneous departure of hundreds of personnel. Systematic closure of 15 years of operations. The evacuation proves my accusations, proves the operations existed, proves the hidden army was real, proves the destabilization was systematic. Because if my accusations were false, you wouldn't evacuate. If my exposure was propaganda, you wouldn't flee. If my documentation was fabricated, you wouldn't abandon operations. But you are evacuating. You are fleeing. You are abandoning. Emergency evacuation that proves everything, that confirms everything, that validates everything. Evacuation that is confession. That is admission. That is acknowledgement. The exposure ends your destabilization capability. Capability you built over 15 years. Capability that cost billions. Capability that involved 12,000 fighters. Capability that conducted countless operations. That capability is ended, destroyed, eliminated, finished. You can't use hidden army that's been exposed. Can't conduct operations that are documented, can't maintain networks that are compromised, can't continue campaigns that are revealed. Your destabilization capability is ended. Your covert warfare is finished. Your hidden army is destroyed. Listen to me, West African leaders. Listen to every president who has experienced unexplained instability. Listen to every government that has faced mysterious insurgencies. Listen to every nation that has suffered suspicious sabotage. The CIA has been operating a hidden army in your countries, 12,000 fighters, operating on your soil, without your knowledge, without your permission, without your consent. Hidden army conducting operations designed to destabilize your governments, to weaken your authority, to undermine your sovereignty. The coup attempts you've faced, not all organic, some were CIA operations. The insurgencies you've fought, not all indigenous, some were CIA orchestrated. The sabotage you've suffered, not all random, some was CIA conducted. The assassinations you've investigated, not all criminal, some were CIA targeted. Operations conducted by their hidden army, funded through their covert budgets, commanded by their intelligence officers. Operations designed to keep West Africa unstable, to maintain the region controllable, to prevent continental unity, to stop African sovereignty. You need to investigate your own countries. Look for the signs I identified. Search for the patterns I discovered. Find the evidence I exposed. Investigate suspicious security companies operating in your nations. Companies with foreign personnel, companies with unclear purposes, companies with suspicious activities, companies with large cash flows. Investigate them. You'll find CIA connections. You'll discover covert operations. You'll expose hidden army components. Investigation that will reveal the truth, that will expose the operations, that will document the crimes. Investigate unexplained incidents in your countries. The assassination that seemed like accident, the insurgency that appeared spontaneous, the sabotage that looked random, the coup attempt that felt organic. Investigate deeper, look closer, examine thoroughly. You'll find CIA involvement. You'll discover hidden army operations. You'll expose covert warfare. Investigation that will prove what I'm telling you, that will validate what I'm exposing, that will confirm what I'm revealing. Arrest their operatives still in your countries, the ones who didn't vanish overnight, the ones who think their cover is still intact, the ones who believe they're still safe. Arrest them. Detain them. Interrogate them. They'll provide information. They'll reveal networks. They'll expose operations. Arrest that security contractor who seems too interested in your military. That development worker who operates in strategically sensitive areas. That humanitarian official who maintains suspicious contacts. Arrest them. They're probably CIA. They're likely hidden army commanders. They're possibly covert operatives. Interrogate them properly, legally but thoroughly. They'll talk. They'll provide evidence. They'll expose the network. Interrogation that will reveal the scope of CIA operations. That will document the extent of hidden army activities. That will expose the scale of destabilization campaigns. Interrogation that will give you the information you need, the evidence you require, the proof you deserve. Interrogation that will validate everything I'm exposing, that will confirm everything I'm revealing, that will prove everything I'm documenting. Coordinate with each other, share intelligence about CIA operations, exchange information about hidden army activities, collaborate on investigations, cooperate on arrests, work together. Because CIA operations span multiple countries, hidden army networks cross borders, destabilization campaigns target the region, you need to coordinate response, to share information, to work together. Coordination that will expose their operations completely, that will document their activities thoroughly, that will end their campaigns permanently. Listen to me, African people. Listen to every citizen who has suffered from instability. Listen to every community that has experienced violence. Listen to every family that has lost members to mysterious conflicts. The chaos you've endured, the violence you've suffered, the instability you've experienced, not all your fault. Not all internal problems, not all African failures. Some was manufactured, some was orchestrated, some was foreign created. CIA operations designed to keep Africa unstable, to maintain the continent divided, to prevent African unity, to stop African sovereignty. The hidden army operating in your countries, the 12,000 fighters conducting covert operations, the foreign commanders managing destabilization campaigns. They're responsible for some of your suffering, for some of your violence, for some of your chaos, responsible for insurgencies that killed your relatives, for sabotage that destroyed your infrastructure, for destabilization that prevented your development, responsible for keeping Africa poor, for maintaining Africa weak, for ensuring Africa dependent. You deserve to know the truth. Truth about CIA operations, truth about hidden armies, truth about covert warfare, truth about destabilization campaigns, truth about foreign interference, truth about sovereignty violations. You deserve to know. And now you know. I've exposed it. I've revealed it. I've documented it. Exposed the hidden army, revealed the operations, documented the crimes, truth that explains some of your suffering, that accounts for some of your struggles, that illuminates some of your challenges. You deserve accountability from CIA for their operations, from your governments for allowing infiltration, from international community for enabling interference. You deserve investigation of CIA operations. You deserve exposure of hidden armies. You deserve prosecution of covert operatives. You deserve compensation for damage caused. You deserve justice for crimes committed. You deserve accountability for sovereignty violated. Accountability that is justified, that is reasonable, that is necessary. Demand it. Demand investigation. Demand exposure. Demand prosecution. Demand compensation. Demand justice. Demand accountability. Demand from your governments. Demand from international organizations. Demand from Western powers. Demand that they investigate, that they expose, that they prosecute, that they compensate, that they deliver justice. Demand it. Insist on it, require it, because you deserve it, because it's your right, because it's necessary. Your governments must investigate, must expose, must prosecute, must demand accountability, must seek justice, must protect sovereignty. International organizations must acknowledge, must condemn, must sanction, must support accountability, must promote justice, must defend sovereignty. Western powers must admit, must apologize, must compensate, must end operations, must respect sovereignty, must accept accountability. Demand it all, from everyone responsible, from everyone complicit, from everyone involved. The hidden army serves specific purposes, not random purposes, not unclear purposes, specific purposes, strategic purposes, calculated purposes, purposes that serve Western interests, that protect Western dominance, that maintain Western control, that preserve Western exploitation, purposes against African sovereignty, against African independence, against African freedom, against African dignity, against African self-determination. The primary purpose is removing African leaders who resist Western control. Leaders like me, leaders who refuse IMF conditions, leaders who reject Western exploitation, leaders who pursue independent policies, leaders who inspire African resistance, leaders who challenge Western dominance, leaders who threaten Western interests. Removing such leaders, through coups, through assassinations, through destabilization, through any means necessary, that's the primary purpose of your hidden army. The secondary purpose is preventing African unity, unity that would create power, unity that would enable resistance, unity that would challenge Western dominance, unity that would threaten Western interests. Preventing that unity by creating conflicts between African nations, by generating instability within African regions, by fostering divisions among African peoples, by maintaining chaos across African continent, preventing unity that would empower Africa, that would strengthen Africa, that would liberate Africa. The tertiary purpose is maintaining resource access, access to African minerals, access to African oil, access to African resources, access at exploitation prices, access under favorable terms, access without interference, maintaining that access, by destabilizing governments that nationalize resources, by removing leaders who demand fair prices, by creating chaos in nations that restrict exports, by generating instability in regions that seek sovereignty, maintaining access that enables exploitation, that preserves Western wealth, that continues African poverty. The quaternary purpose is justifying military presence, Western military bases in Africa, Western troops on African soil, Western forces in African regions, justifying that presence, by creating instability that requires intervention, by generating chaos that demands peacekeeping, by fostering conflicts that need mediation, by maintaining crises that justify deployment, justifying presence that enables control, that facilitates exploitation, that prevents sovereignty. These purposes explain everything. Explain why you built hidden army. Explain why you spent billions. Explain why you recruited 12,000 fighters. Explain why you maintained operations for 15 years. Explain why you conducted assassinations. Explain why you organized insurgencies. Explain why you executed sabotage. Explain why you created chaos. Everything explained by these purposes. These strategic goals. These calculated objectives. Purposes that serve Western interests. That harm African interests. That prevent African sovereignty. The age of CIA covert operations in Africa is ending. Not might end, not could end, not will end eventually, is ending, right now, this moment, the age where CIA operates hidden armies on African soil, where intelligence agencies conduct covert destabilization, where foreign powers wage secret warfare. That age is ending. I'm ending it. Through exposure, through revelation, through documentation, through accountability demands. Ending it by exposing your hidden army, by revealing your operations, by documenting your crimes, by demanding justice, by insisting on accountability, by requiring sovereignty, respect. Ending it by showing African leaders what's possible, by demonstrating that exposure works, by proving that resistance succeeds, by validating that sovereignty matters. Ending the age of covert operations. Ending the era of hidden armies. Ending the epoch of secret warfare. The era of African security sovereignty is beginning, not might begin, not could begin, not will begin someday, is beginning, right now, this moment. The era where African nations control their own security, where African governments protect their own stability, where African people determine their own peace, where sovereignty over security is real, where independence in defense is actual, where freedom from foreign interference is genuine. Beginning it by exposing foreign operations, by revealing covert armies, by documenting secret warfare, by demanding accountability, by insisting on justice, by requiring respect. Beginning the era where African nations investigate foreign interference, where African governments arrest covert operatives, where African people demand sovereignty, where African leaders coordinate security, where African institutions protect independence, where African sovereignty is real. That era is beginning. I'm beginning it. Through this exposure, through this revelation, through this documentation, through this demand for accountability, beginning it for Burkina Faso, beginning it for West Africa, beginning it for entire continent. The era I'm beginning will spread. Mali will expose foreign operations. Niger will reveal covert activities. Chad will document interference. Guinea will demand accountability. The era I'm beginning will transform Africa, will end foreign interference, will establish security sovereignty, will create genuine independence. And no amount of denial, evidence destruction, or operation closure will change what I've exposed. Your denial is meaningless because I have proof. Your evidence destruction is futile because I have copies. Your operation closure is admission because it proves existence. What I've exposed cannot be hidden again, cannot be concealed again, cannot be denied again. I exposed CIA's hidden army. I revealed their covert operations. I documented their destabilization campaigns. That exposure is permanent. That revelation is lasting. That documentation is irreversible. The world knows now. Africa knows. West Africa knows. Every nation knows. Every leader knows. Every person knows. Knows about your hidden army. Knows about your operations. Knows about your crimes. Knowledge that cannot be erased, cannot be forgotten, cannot be denied. Knowledge that changes everything. That transforms relationships. That empowers resistance. That enables sovereignty. African nations will investigate, will search for your operatives, will arrest your agents, will prosecute your crimes, will demand accountability, will seek justice, will require compensation. Investigation across the continent, arrests in multiple nations, prosecutions in various countries, accountability demanded everywhere, justice sought universally, compensation required comprehensively. African nations will investigate because the exposure in Burkina Faso changed everything, changed their awareness, changed their understanding, changed their perception of the threat, changed their willingness to act, changed their capability to respond. African nations that once ignored the possibility of foreign intelligence operations now acknowledge the reality, that once dismissed the threat of espionage networks now recognize the danger, that once accepted foreign presence without question now scrutinize every activity with suspicion. The exposure transformed African consciousness, awakened African vigilance, activated African response. African nations will investigate, not might investigate, not could investigate, will investigate. With certainty, with determination, with commitment. Will investigate because they now understand the methods, understand how Mossad operates, understand how foreign intelligence agencies function, understand how spies infiltrate, understand how networks are built, understand how operations are conducted, understanding gained from Burkina Faso's exposure, from David Cohen's prosecution, from the evidence published, from the documentation released, from the testimony revealed, understanding that empowers investigation, that enables detection, that facilitates exposure, that supports prosecution. African nations now know what to look for, know what patterns indicate espionage, know what behaviors suggest intelligence operations, know what activities reveal foreign interference, knowledge that transforms capability, that enhances effectiveness, that ensures success. Will search for your operatives systematically, search not randomly but systematically, not haphazardly but methodically, not superficially but thoroughly. Search using techniques validated in Burkina Faso, using methods proven effective, using approaches demonstrated successful. Search through background investigations that reveal inconsistencies in personal histories, through financial analyses that expose suspicious funding sources, through surveillance operations that detect intelligence tradecraft, through technical monitoring that intercepts operational communications, through human intelligence that reports suspicious activities. Search comprehensively across all sectors, all industries, all organizations, all communities. Search that leaves no stone unturned, no possibility unexplored, no operative undetected. Search in government ministries where operatives seek policy information, in military establishments where spies gather defense intelligence, in security agencies where agents collect operational data, in business communities where operatives establish cover, in civil society organizations where agents build networks, in academic institutions where spies recruit sources, in media organizations where operatives influence narratives. Search everywhere that foreign intelligence might operate, everywhere that espionage might occur, everywhere that sovereignty might be violated. Search conducted by professional security services, by capable intelligence agencies, by effective counterintelligence operations, by trained investigators, by skilled analysts. Search that will find operatives, that will detect spies, that will expose agents, that will identify networks, will arrest your agents decisively, arrest not hesitantly but decisively, not cautiously but boldly, not partially but completely, arrest when evidence is sufficient, when proof is conclusive, when guilt is demonstrable, arrest coordinated across nations to prevent escape, synchronized across regions to stop communication, integrated across continent to ensure comprehensive capture. Arrest that is professional, that is legal, that is constitutional, that is legitimate. Arrest conducted according to law, following proper procedures, respecting human rights, maintaining due process, but arrest nonetheless. Arrest that removes operatives from operation, that eliminates spies from activity, that extracts agents from networks, that stops espionage from continuing. Arrest in Mali where investigations will expose Israeli operatives, in Niger where searches will detect Mossad agents, in Chad where examinations will reveal foreign spies, in Nigeria where inquiries will identify intelligence officers, in Ivory Coast where investigations will uncover espionage networks, in Ghana where searches will find covert operatives, in Senegal where examinations will expose foreign agents. Arrest across West Africa, across Central Africa, across East Africa, across Southern Africa, across the entire continent. Arrest of dozens of operatives initially, of hundreds of agents eventually, of extensive networks comprehensively. Arrest that dismantles foreign intelligence operations, that destroys espionage networks, that eliminates covert interference, that protects African sovereignty. Will prosecute your crimes publicly. Prosecute not secretly but publicly, not quietly but openly, not privately but transparently. Prosecute in courts that are open, in proceedings that are broadcast, in trials that are transparent, in processes that are fair. Prosecute according to national laws, following legal procedures, respecting judicial processes, maintaining constitutional requirements, but prosecute vigorously. Prosecute effectively, prosecute successfully, prosecution that exposes operations, that reveals methods, that documents crimes, that proves violations, prosecution that educates publics, that informs citizens, that raises awareness, that enhances understanding, prosecute for espionage against the state, for intelligence gathering without authorization, for recruiting agents without permission, for conducting operations without consent, for violating national security laws, for compromising state secrets, for undermining national sovereignty, prosecute with evidence collected through investigation, with documentation preserved through monitoring, with testimony obtained through interrogation, with proof gathered through professional work, prosecution supported by comprehensive evidence, by thorough documentation, by credible testimony, by undeniable proof, prosecution that results in conviction, that ensures punishment, that delivers justice, that achieves accountability, will demand accountability persistently, demand not temporarily but persistently, not occasionally but continuously, not weakly but strongly, demand accountability from Mossad for operations conducted, from Israeli intelligence for espionage committed, from Israeli government for sovereignty violated, demand through diplomatic channels that are formal, through international forums that are public, through legal mechanisms that are legitimate, through political pressure that is sustained, demand that is clear, that is explicit, that is unambiguous, that is non-negotiable, demand for explanation of operations, for justification of espionage, for acknowledgement of violations, for commitment to cessation, for guarantee of non-repetition, demand accountability not just from Israel, from all nations conducting intelligence operations in Africa, from CIA for their hidden armies, from MI6 for their covert networks, from all foreign intelligence agencies for their espionage activities, from all nations for their sovereignty violations, demand that is universal, that is comprehensive, that is absolute, demand that transforms international norms, that establishes new standards, that creates new expectations, demand that makes clear that African sovereignty matters, that African independence is real, that African dignity is non-negotiable, that African security is paramount, demand that changes relationships, that alters dynamics, that transforms interactions. We'll seek justice comprehensively, seek not partially but comprehensively, not selectively but universally, not inadequately but thoroughly, seek justice for all sovereignty violations, for all espionage crimes, for all security breaches, for all independence compromises, for all dignity affronts, seek through prosecution that is fair, through conviction that is just, through punishment that is appropriate, through accountability that is real. Seek justice that restores sovereignty, that repairs dignity, that rebuilds trust, that ensures future respect. Justice that is not revenge but restoration, not retribution but accountability, not punishment but correction. Seek justice through national courts that are independent, through judicial processes that are fair, through legal procedures that are proper, through constitutional mechanisms that are legitimate. Seek justice that is transparent, that is public, that is accountable, that is reviewable, justice that respects rights while ensuring accountability, that maintains fairness while delivering consequences, that preserves legitimacy while achieving justice. Seek justice not just for current violations, for historical violations, for systematic violations, for continuous violations, for all violations that have occurred, that are occurring, that might occur, justice that is comprehensive, that is thorough, that is complete. Will require compensation appropriately, require not request but require, not suggest but demand, not hope but insist, require compensation for damages caused by espionage, for harm inflicted by operations, for costs imposed by interference, for sovereignty violations committed, for security breaches conducted, for independence compromised, require compensation that is financial, that is diplomatic, that is political, that is comprehensive, compensation in monetary reparations for costs incurred, in diplomatic apologies for violations committed, in policy changes for behaviors corrected, in operational cessations for activities ended, in respect demonstrated for sovereignty acknowledged, require compensation not just from Israel, from all nations that conducted operations, from CIA for their destabilization, from MI6 for their interference, from all intelligence agencies for their violations, from all governments for their complicity, require compensation that is proportional to harm, that is adequate to damage, that is sufficient to costs, that is appropriate to violations. Compensation that acknowledges wrong, that accepts responsibility, that demonstrates remorse, that ensures non-repetition, compensation that is not just symbolic, not merely gestural, not only nominal, but substantial, real, meaningful, significant. Investigation across the continent means coordinated effort, means shared intelligence, means collaborative operations, means unified purpose. Investigation that spans from Cairo to Cape Town, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Casablanca to Mogadishu. Investigation in every region, in every sub-region, in every nation. Investigation that is continental movement, continental awakening, continental response, continental transformation. Investigation coordinated through African Union mechanisms, through regional economic communities, through bilateral agreements, through intelligence sharing arrangements, coordination that makes investigation more effective, that makes detection more likely, that makes exposure more certain, that makes accountability more achievable. Arrests in multiple nations means coordinated action, means synchronized operations, means integrated efforts, means unified execution. Arrests not just in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger, in Chad, in Nigeria, in Ivory Coast, in Ghana, in Senegal, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in South Africa, in Egypt, in Morocco, in Ethiopia. Arrests everywhere that investigations expose operatives, everywhere that searches detect agents, everywhere that examinations reveal spies. Arrests in multiple nations simultaneously to prevent warning, coordinated to stop escape, synchronized to ensure capture, integrated to preserve networks for prosecution. Arrests that demonstrate continental unity, that prove African capability, that validate African sovereignty. Prosecutions in various countries means diverse legal actions, means different judicial processes, means varied legal systems, but same objective, same purpose, same goal. Prosecutions in common law countries, in civil law countries, in customary law countries, in hybrid law countries. Prosecutions following different procedures but pursuing same justice. Applying different laws but seeking same accountability, using different processes but achieving same outcome. Prosecutions that may differ in form but unite in substance, that may vary in procedure but align in purpose, that may diverge in process but converge in objective. Prosecutions in various countries that collectively deliver continental justice, that together achieve African accountability, that jointly ensure regional security. Accountability demanded everywhere means universal requirement, means comprehensive insistence, means absolute expectation. Accountability demanded in every nation that discovers operations, in every country that detects espionage, in every state that exposes violations. Accountability demanded from every intelligence agency that operated, from every government that authorized, from every nation that benefited, demanded everywhere without exception, without exclusion, without exemption. Accountability that is universal African demand, continental requirement, regional insistence, national expectation. Accountability demanded everywhere that sovereignty was violated, that independence was compromised, that security was breached, that dignity was affronted. Justice sought universally means continental pursuit, means regional quest, means collective effort. Justice sought not by one nation but by all nations, not by single government but by entire continent, not by isolated people but by united peoples. Justice sought through prosecution, through conviction, through punishment, through accountability, through restoration. Justice sought that is universal in scope, continental in scale, comprehensive in extent, absolute in determination. Justice sought universally until achieved universally, until delivered universally, until ensured universally. Justice that transforms Africa, that liberates continent, that empowers people, that secures future. Compensation required comprehensively means total demand, means complete insistence, means absolute requirement. Compensation required not partially but comprehensively, not selectively but universally, not inadequately but thoroughly, required for all damages, for all harms, for all costs, for all violations, for all breaches, for all compromises, required from all responsible parties, from all complicit actors, from all benefiting entities. Compensation required comprehensively across all dimensions, financial, diplomatic, political, moral, ethical, legal. Compensation that is comprehensive in scope, total in extent, complete in coverage, absolute in demand. International community will respond. Some will condemn, some will investigate, some will demand accountability, some will support justice, some will defend sovereignty. Response that varies by nation. Response that depends on interests. Response that reflects relationships, but response that cannot ignore exposure, cannot dismiss documentation, cannot deny evidence. The international community will respond because the exposure is too significant to ignore, too documented to dismiss, too public to conceal, too proven to deny. Response that varies dramatically across different nations. Response that reflects diverse interests. Response that demonstrates competing priorities. Response that reveals different values. Some nations will respond supportively, will endorse African actions, will validate African sovereignty, will support African justice. Other nations will respond critically, will question African motives, will challenge African methods, will oppose African demands. Response that varies, but response nonetheless. Response that acknowledges reality even when opposing actions. Response that recognizes exposure even when defending operations. Some will condemn Israeli intelligence operations, will criticize Mossad activities, will denounce foreign espionage in Africa, condemnation from nations that value sovereignty, that respect independence, that support African dignity, that oppose intelligence interference, condemnation from countries that have experienced similar violations, that have suffered similar espionage, that have endured similar interference, condemnation from China that opposes Western intelligence dominance, from Russia that resists foreign espionage, from Iran that challenges Israeli operations, from Cuba that defends sovereignty, from Venezuela that supports independence, from nations across global South that stand with Africa. Condemnation that is public, that is vocal, that is clear, that is unambiguous. Condemnation that strengthens African position, that validates African actions, that supports African demands, that encourages African continuation. Condemnation that creates diplomatic pressure on Israel, that generates political costs for operations, that imposes reputational damage for espionage, that produces consequences for violations. Condemnation that matters, that helps, that supports, that strengthens. Condemnation that is not just symbolic, not merely rhetorical, not only gestural, but substantive, real, meaningful, significant. Condemnation that changes dynamics, that alters calculations, that transforms situations. Some will investigate their own Israeli connections, will examine Israeli presence in their territories, will scrutinize Israeli activities in their jurisdictions, will review Israeli operations in their countries. Investigation motivated by Burkina Faso exposure, inspired by David Cohen prosecution, enabled by evidence published, facilitated by documentation released. Investigation in nations that now question what they previously accepted, that now scrutinize what they previously ignored, that now examine what they previously overlooked. Investigation in countries across Asia, across Latin America, across other regions. Investigation wherever Israeli intelligence operates, wherever Mossad maintains presence, wherever foreign espionage threatens sovereignty. Investigation that discovers similar operations, that reveals comparable networks, that exposes equivalent espionage. Investigation that validates Burkina Faso's concerns, that confirms African suspicions, that proves continental fears. Investigation that leads to similar exposures, to comparable prosecutions, to equivalent accountability. Investigation that globalizes the issue, that universalizes the concern, that internationalizes the response. Investigation that proves this is not just African problem, not just regional issue, not just continental concern, but global challenge, universal threat, international issue. Some will demand accountability from Israel, will require explanation for operations, will insist on justification for espionage, will demand cessation of interference, demand from nations with leverage, with influence, with power, with capability, demand through diplomatic channels that are effective, through international forums that are influential, through economic mechanisms that are powerful, through political pressure that is substantial, demand that is serious, that is credible, that is consequential, demand that Israel cannot easily ignore, cannot simply dismiss, cannot completely avoid, demand from nations that were allies but are reconsidering, that were partners but are questioning, that were friends but are challenging, demand that strains relationships, that tests partnerships, that challenges friendships, demand that creates costs for Israel, that generates consequences for operations, that produces accountability for violations, demand that is not just rhetorical, not merely symbolic, not only gestural, but substantive, real, meaningful, significant, demand that changes Israeli calculations, that alters Israeli strategies, that transforms Israeli operations. Some will support African justice, will endorse African investigations, will assist African prosecutions, will validate African accountability demands, support that is diplomatic, that is political, that is practical, that is meaningful, support through statements endorsing investigations, through assistance with prosecutions, through pressure for accountability, through validation of sovereignty, support from nations that respect African independence, that value African dignity, that defend African rights, that support African sovereignty, support that strengthens African position, that validates African actions, that encourages African persistence, that ensures African success, support that is not just verbal, not merely rhetorical, not only symbolic, but practical, real, tangible, concrete, support through intelligence sharing that assists investigations, through technical assistance that enhances prosecutions, through diplomatic backing that strengthens demands, through political support that validates actions, support that makes difference, that helps achieve objectives, that ensures success, that delivers results, support that proves African actions are legitimate, that African demands are justified, that African sovereignty is real, that African independence matters. Some will defend African sovereignty, will affirm African independence, will validate African security, will support African dignity, defense that is public, that is vocal, that is clear, that is strong, defense through statements supporting sovereignty, through actions respecting independence, through policies acknowledging security, through positions validating dignity, defense from nations that oppose intelligence interference everywhere, that reject espionage operations universally, that condemn sovereignty violations consistently, defense that is principled, that is consistent, that is credible, that is meaningful, defense that creates international support for Africa, that builds global backing for African actions, that generates universal validation for African demands, that produces worldwide recognition for African sovereignty, defense that isolates Israel diplomatically, that pressures Israel politically, that constrains Israel operationally, that limits Israel strategically, defense that matters, that helps, that supports, that strengthens, defense that proves African sovereignty is not just African concern, that African independence is not just African interest, that African dignity is not just African value, but universal principle, global norm, international standard, response that varies by nation because interests differ, because relationships vary, because priorities diverge, because values differ. Western nations respond cautiously because they conduct similar operations, because they maintain similar networks, because they pursue similar espionage, because they violate similar sovereignty. Response that is measured, that is careful, that is diplomatic, that is hypocritical. Response that acknowledges exposure while defending intelligence generally, that criticizes specific violations while justifying espionage broadly, that expresses concern while maintaining operations. Response that is inadequate, that is insufficient, that is disappointing, but response that cannot completely ignore, cannot totally dismiss, cannot entirely deny. Non-Western nations respond more supportively because they've experienced similar violations, because they've suffered similar espionage, because they've endured similar interference, because they understand African concerns. Response that is genuine, that is supportive, that is helpful, that is meaningful. Response that condemns Israeli operations, that supports African investigations, that validates African prosecutions, that demands accountability. Response that strengthens African position, that validates African actions, that supports African sovereignty. Response that makes difference, that helps achieve objectives, that ensures success. Response that depends on interests means calculated reactions, means strategic responses, means self-interested positions. Nations with close Israeli ties respond defensively, respond protectively, respond supportively of Israel. Response that minimizes violations, that justifies operations, that excuses espionage. Response from United States with strategic alliance, from European nations with close relationships, from other Israeli partners with significant ties. Response that reflects their interests, their relationships, their priorities, their values. Response that disappoints Africa, that frustrates African nations, that angers African people, but response that was expected, that was anticipated, that was predicted.